Okay, this is part 3 of what has now become a 4-part granny square top. So in class this morning, I had one guinea pig who I went through things with, and I decided, she didn't decide, I decided that trying to do the joining and adjusting particularly for the sleeve, but adjusting for your fit and doing the neckline and edging was a step too far. So we're going to do, in this class, we're going to talk about joining and adjusting for your fit. And then next month, we're going to talk about the neckline and edging and how to make all of that look very, very pretty. So that's the plan. And Ingrid's not going to show her face because she has not started her granny squares. There she is. Totally fine. There's no rush on. I mean, I haven't finished all of my granny squares yet either. I had enough I was going to be able to show a neckline, but now I don't have to. But I do have enough. In particular, the sleeve seems to be the area where the most fit needs to take place, or the hardest place maybe to adjust for the sleeve. But first, I want to show about how to join these squares. Let me share with you. So I did go through and I watched all of her videos. And if you have not watched her videos on joining, I do recommend, because I think after what we go through here today, she kind of shows you the whole picture of how it's going to come together. It might put things together for you. Let's see if I can do this. Let me show you how to, if you haven't found her videos yet, I'm going to show you how to find them. Search. Let me share my screen. Okay, so if you go to Instagram, her page is called Little Golden Nook, which I'm going to click on. Okay, if you scroll up just a little bit and you hit the little video button, not at the bottom bar, that's your video button. Her video button is right in the middle here, in the center. Whoop, not there. Sorry. Right here in the center. And it shows you all of her videos. And the one on the top right here and in the bottom left are 2 different versions of how she does her joining. And then if you scroll down, so you can see she's got different images and videos of a lot of the patterns that she made, but you're going to see the Oh My Goodness top in here. You keep going. Some of these I think she added later. You keep scrolling down. She has one here that shows you how to finish up that final hole.
Last stitch. Sorry, last.
And she shows you how to join it. And then she's got another video here about joining with your 3/4.
So I'm going to show you now how to join your 3/4
square in. Okay. So the things that we're going to cover today are in here. But just so you know, that's how you find her videos. They're only available on Instagram. Okay. But that's how you find the videos, because it did take me a hot second to figure out how to do that. Okay, so let me stop sharing for a sec. All right, so for this pattern, there's a couple of ways. You know, I like to go through the whole thing and try different things and figure out, is her way really the best way? And knowing who our audience was, I tried to find what might be an easier option. So there are 2 options in joining your squares. We can follow her method, which is a modified join as you go, which means that we're putting the final round on our squares, which is a joining round. And on we can't join all of them that way, but we can join rows that way. And what that lets you do is have fewer ends to weave it. For some people, I think it might be a little overwhelming. The woman who was here this morning, I really had to walk her through it. She was kind of new to the whole putting it together piece. So she might be going with this second option, which is to put the joining row, which gives these little loops around all of your squares. So if you haven't finished making your squares, you could eliminate another end by just continuing on, because it's in your same color that you finish your squares with. No matter if it's a square A or a square B, you're always going to finish in your joining color. And you could put the joining round on, and then once you have it on all of them, I'll show you how to slip stitch them together. So that's one option. Or you can do the modified join as you go that she describes in the pattern and in her videos. I'm going to show you both ways, and you can decide. If you've joined granny squares in a different way, you are free to do that as well. But I wanted to give you a couple of options, keeping to the style of her pattern as much as possible. Okay, so let me show you the switch here. I'm going to show you the joining, doing your final row. I had to rig a little setup here, so if it's, I have not cut any of my ends. I have crocheted over my ends, but I haven't gone through to make sure they're all secure yet. Figure that's going to be maybe a stiff drink or a nice bottle of wine and a good movie to sit there and do all those ends. But you can do this without having dealt with your ends, obviously. So these two squares, I'm going to show you how to put the joining row on, and then I'm going to show you how to slip stitch them together. Okay. So let me grab a square I have not done that with yet. So when you did your final round, whether it was square A or square B, you finished with half double crochets all the way around. Hopefully you guys can see this. So I've got, and you had to have, I want to say it was 14 on each side. I'm trying to remember if that was the right number. I'm going to show you how to fudge it a little bit. And even in one of her videos, it does fudge. She does have to fudge it a little bit. So since it's all the same yarn color, easy to fudge. But here's how you would put the joining round, how you would do it on a full square. So we're going to start in a corner with a slip stitch. Okay. I'm going to chain one. I'm sorry, I am going to not chain one. Started with a slip stitch. I'm going to do a single crochet into that same corner space. I'm going to chain 3. And I'm going to do another single crochet in the same corner space. Every corner gets that treatment. And what that creates is a little loop right there that makes it really easy when you're joining, whichever method you're doing. It gives you a nice little loop that you can get all 4 of your corners together. It kind of sticks out a little bit, so they're not pulling in or puckering at the corner spots. Okay, so every corner is going to have a single crochet, a chain 3, and a single crochet in the same loop. Then zoom in a little here. We're going to work into our half double crochets. And we are going to chain 3. So I finished with a single crochet in my corner space. I'm going to skip 2 stitches. Now remember, the first stitch, the top of it really leans into that corner space. So I'm going to skip this one and this one, and I'm going to go right into here with a single crochet. That's the only place that you really have to look, is to make sure that you are not skipping here and here and going in here. Remember that the top of your first stitch is into that corner space, okay? We're going to do this all the way across. Chain 3, skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, and make another single crochet. And what we're making here are these little loops. You're going to have 5 of them across each side. And then you'll have 4 corner spaces. Chain 3, skip 2 stitches, single crochet, chain 3, skip 2 stitches, single crochet. The final one should put you into the next corner space. Chain 3, skip 1, oops, sorry, skip 1, 2, and into the corner. If by chance you have screwed up somewhere and you don't have, maybe you're only skipping 1 stitch here, or you have to skip 3 stitches, it's totally fine. You're never going to see it. What's most important here is that you've got 5 loops. So we had our corner one. I'm not counting that one, but I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You don't want to have 6, because we're going to use these loops to join. In whichever method you choose, you're going to use these loops to join them together, okay? So I've made my first single into the next corner, chain 3, another single in the same corner space, and do make sure you're going into the corner. And then I repeat around all the sides, chain 3, and this is all written out and in her video. Skip this first one, second one, single. So if you're going to do your joining round on all of your squares, you're going to continue all the way around, the same method on all your sides. It does, you know, if you've got kind of the wonky side with the half double like I do, this helps straighten a lot of that out. And what you end up with is something that looks like this. So if you were going to do the slip stitch method, you would put this joining around all of your squares. And I will show you in the next step how to do it on the half squares, excuse me. Okay, but let me show you how to join them. And then we're going to talk about the layout and everything else. This is assuming you've already laid out and you've figured out where you want your squares to be. We'll talk about that in a second. All right, so to slip stitch to join these, let me take my yarn back out. Start with the slip knot on your hook. And start in a corner space. Slip stitch to join. I would not make these tight slip stitches. I'm going to go to where I want to join it. I'm going to slip stitch in the corresponding corner. Oh, get my yarn in the right place. And this is where it starts to get a little awkward with the camera and holding it here. Let me pull it all the way through. Okay. So now I've got them next to each other, okay? The easiest way to do it from here on out is then to fold them so the right sides are together. Get my loop back, hold on. Okay, slip stitch to join. Now I'm going to fold them so my right sides are together, and I can slip stitch through my loops. And I have 5 on each side, which is why it was important to have 5. I tried this a couple of different ways, and I found the best way to do it is to put 2 slip stitch into each loop. So I'm not going to slip stitch tight because I don't want these to pucker. So go underneath both loops. Again, my right sides are facing. Pull my yarn through and slip stitch. And then I'm going to do it again. It's almost like putting one on, come on. You could also do a single crochet, but I do think that adds a little bulk, and I was trying to avoid the bulk. Hold on. Try that again. I have my one arm wrapped around the hole for this stand that the camera's on. So I apologize. This is all awkward. Okay. So I'm going to do 2 slip stitches in here. Almost like having one at this end and then one down here at this end. And I am not pulling those tight. I'm just trying to get it through. Come on. If it keeps catching on. I'm sorry about that. All the way through. Okay. And now I'm going to go to my next 2. Slip stitch 2 of them here. 1 and 2. I'm going to stop right there and just show you what that looks like when I open it up. If you pull and see, my corner got pulled a little tight. So it's kind of pulling the corner in. But if you don't pull them tight, you get the join through there. So I would go back and I would loosen up my corner and do it loose. And you could join them all the way around this way, joining your corners like we did here, but loose. And you'll get that nice kind of open, it's almost like a little bit of a lacy look all the way across. I'm going to finish this row so you can see the whole thing. But by putting 2, you don't get it pulling quite so much. You could also go through the stitches if you wanted to. I just find it really easy to go through the space. And I'm getting down to the corner here. And go through that corner loop. And that corner loop. And then slip stitch. And then when you open it, try to ignore all the ends. You have a nice join.
The corner loops only get how many stitches?
I just did 1 because then when you come and you do, I have another one here somewhere. When you do the next one,
Okay.
you're going to go through the 2 corner loops that are here and this one. So it's going to get a little bit extra in there. So if you just do it once through there, it's going to get caught again when you add another piece up over here.
Okay.
Yeah. So you don't need to go overboard there. So that's one way. So I kept it loose up here. This is where I started down here at the bottom. You can see it's pretty puckered. That's because it's not loose. So that's one way to do it. That would be option 1. Put that joining row all the way around, lay out your pattern the way you want them, and then you can join them all together. Okay. That's one way. Let's talk about another way. So here's how she does it in the, I have to get myself around this pole here before.
Why is the camera so jumpy?
It's because it's got that auto adjust on it. I had to use my iPad. My regular camera wasn't document
Okay.
number wasn't working, so I apologize. There's probably a way to turn that off, but. So here's how she does it in both the pattern. It keeps trying to zoom in every time I move a piece of it. Let's see here. And if you haven't looked at the updated pattern, I have all of the updated pattern here. So now I can't remember what was old pattern and what was updated, if any of that changed. But in her pattern, this is how she starts. She starts across the bottom edge and that's what I'm going to demonstrate now. And then she joins rows going this way, back and forth, okay? And this is how she shows it in the video. So this is what's considered a modified join as you go. So if you're going to do this method, you do have to lay out your pattern if you are doing all different kinds of squares. If you're just doing one kind of square with one color of yarn, then it doesn't matter. She does give you layouts in the pattern. Let me find mine. And I'm going to use her layout. Okay, so here's the layout for my size. So on the different layouts, she has the different colored squares. Some are for square A and some are for square B. And she has a key that tells you which are which, if you want to lay it out that way. And then she's got pictures showing you, so you get a nice distribution of the color, okay? The red lines that run through here are folding lines. So this would be the front. Here's your two sleeves, and here's the back. So it's all going to be joined and then folded across the shoulders, and then the sides get joined front and back, and the sleeves get joined front and back, okay? Some of the squares, let's see, are, it shows up better on this one. So here's the main, this one is that has all of them on there. So for all the different sizes, and she gives you a key telling you if it's square A, square B, the fold lines, the half squares, and for the different sizes. So I'm doing this one here. I'm going to turn it so you can see. So here's my front. And these yellow squares, they look like full squares, but if you look at the key, the yellow squares are the half squares. The computer program just wouldn't do half squares, okay? So she's kind of got a line running through them to show that they are just half squares. So this is the design I'm going to use. The blue squares are 3/4 squares. So in my pattern, they go underneath the arms and again at the neck. And then it's got half squares on the edges of the sleeves, the back, and then again the edge of the sleeve. Okay. So here's what I did with my guinea pig student this morning. Is we took her squares. I'm going to show you an example and zoom out. We took her squares and we laid them all out. Now, I haven't used all of my color here yet. I just pulled, so I'm going to be taking this apart, but I wanted to show it as an example. She laid them all out and we just went kind of row by row and just and changed around the colors. I mean, I have squares that are right next to each other. I haven't followed a pattern here, but I have pinned them all together. So we laid her whole thing out, and when she was happy with it, then we pinned them all together, okay? When she was happy with her color placement. And then, so we would have had half squares down here across the bottom. And then what we did is we unpinned the half squares and started the joining. And then once these got joined, we unpinned the first row. That way you didn't have squares all over the place. If you have to put it down in the middle, your squares were still where you wanted them to be. And you could just take off the ones that you needed to work on the joining. And then they would be joined to this row, and then the next row would be joined, and then the next row would be joined. So that's how we approached it with her, and that seemed to work. Another student who was really wanted to get this done had gone through and done the same thing, pinned all of the squares, and then we ended up adjusting her sleeve because it was too big. So we were able just to unpin the ones that we didn't want and repin them together so we knew where they needed to be joined. Okay. So let me show you how you would do this joining method, and then we'll talk a little bit about the fit. Okay. All right. So for her modified join as you go method, it starts with your half squares across the bottom. And we did the exact same thing. So this one I've already done. When you made these half squares, and make sure you're looking at the right side, not the wrong side. I did bother to go through and do these ends already. The right side, excuse me, has half of a corner here. And that's where we're going to start, is in that little corner space right there. You would start the same way with the slip knot. So you're going to add a joining row to all of what I call the finished edges of your half squares. This part right here, the flat, the straightaway here, is going to be where our edging goes. That does not get a joining row on it. When you're doing a 3/4 square like this, any place that you have put those half double crochets is what's going to get the joining, quote unquote, joining row with the little loops on it. These raw edges that don't have your half doubles just stay the way they are. That's where we're going to pick up and add edging. Okay. So if you're going ahead and doing the previous method and putting all of your joining rows on, you're only going to put it across the sides that have the half double crochet. You'll leave the other sides empty. So the half square is the same way as the full square. I slip stitched in the corner, single crochet, chain 3, go back in the same space, single crochet. And then you would do the same thing, chain 3, skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, and you would make your loops. These get the same thing. They will get 5 loops up the side, just like the full squares did. You get to the top, you do the same thing, a single crochet and a chain 3 and another single crochet, and you come down the next side. When you're ready to join the next one, you're going to finish. There really isn't a corner space on the right side, on the left side of this square. When we made these, there really isn't a corner space. You just put you just do stitches into the end. So when you get to the end, you're going to make here's my last loop. I did a chain 3, skip 2 stitches, and I put a single crochet in the last stitch. Then I chained 1, which is what is kind of bridging the gap. And then I went to my second square and I put a single crochet in that corner space, because there is a little bit of a corner on the right-hand side. There's just not one on the left-hand side. Did a single crochet, chain 3, single crochet in the same space, and connected along. So all of my half, my half squares have the joining round on those sides, and they're all connected by one chain one in the middle, okay? And it's not really, it doesn't really look like a chain one space anymore. It's like a chain one bridge, but it keeps them all connected. Here's how you get to the next. You would, depending on your size, you're going to have a different number of these across the bottom. I believe mine had 4, okay? But I got to the end, and here's where you have to cut your yarn, okay? But I was able to join all 4 of those without having more ends to weave in. So that's a little bit of a saver. So that was my first row. And then I would take my piece that is all pinned together, and I would unpin my next row of squares. So we're going to pretend it was this one. Let's move it down here. This happens to be a sleeve, so it doesn't look exactly right. But so let's pretend this is my next row. I know this one is going to get joined, actually, gets joined like this. This one isn't there in the top. So I would unpin what is my next row, or I could just do one at a time and unpin them so they stay in place, okay? To start the first one, and this is all done in her diagram too. Let me zoom in here. Okay. So the pink lines are where we did the joining rows with a little chain one in between. We did the joining row, chain one in between, joining row, and we cut our yarn. The green lines are where we're going to do the next row. So we've got to do the joining rows around 3 sides of our first square. And then the side that's going to join, because we're not worried about what's going to join to these other sides. The side that's going to join to this square, we are going to put the joining row on and attach it at the same time, which is what I'm going to show you now. So this is another option. So what I have done here, let me get my sleeve out of the way. This is my, the last square. So I worked from right to left. Now I'm kind of work from left to right. It's just easier that way when you do the join as you go, is to kind of work back and forth from right to left and left to right. I have done 3 sides. I started here with my joining row, did the sides just as I did, and now I'm going to join here to this one, okay? Now, in order for me to crochet this direction, I would have to go to the other side and work across. So bear with me in that I am going to just turn this around so that I can crochet the direction that my body works. And you're going to have to do the same thing too. It's just really awkward with the camera. So again, this is our bottom edge. And now we're going to join this unfinished edge to this edge. All right, so I finished the full corner here. Let me zoom in just a little. And I wrote this out so that I wouldn't forget. So we're going to slip stitch. When we did this row, we had done a single crochet in the last stitch, did a chain one, finish. When you get to the very end, we are going to make a little loop on the very last one. So I put a single crochet in the last stitch, just like I had done here. But then I did a chain 3 and another single in the last stitch. So I kind of made up a corner, but I did that so that I can join to it. Okay. So I'm going to slip stitch into that little corner space I made. I have to put on my standard glasses, sorry. Oh, much better. So I've slip stitched to join. Let me get my notes. Instead of chaining 3 though, I'm just going to chain 1. And then I'm going to, on the side that does not have a joining row yet, I'm going to skip 2 stitches. So this one and this one, and I'm going to put a single crochet in the next stitch. And your yarn is kind of coming across the top at this point. Okay. Then I'm going to go back to the side that I've joined. I'm going to go into that first chain 3 loop of the 5 of them that are up that side. Now here you can go under or over, it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to slip stitch in there. I'm going to chain 1. I'm going to skip 2 stitches back on this side. 1, 2, single crochet. It's going to get kind of all bunchy here. I'm going to stop and spread it out as we go. And thankfully, as I watched her video, she's just as awkward with the camera, trying to do this so that you can see it. And of course I have dark yarn, which doesn't help. All right, so I skipped 2 stitches, made a single crochet, chain 1, go into the next chain 3 space, and I just found it easier to go underneath, slip stitch, chain 1, skip 2 stitches. So instead of making a chain 3 every time you skip stitches, what you're doing is you're making a chain 1, slip stitch, chain 1 back on this side. So now I'm going to skip single crocheted, chain 1, nope, skip 2 stitches, chain 1, yeah, chain 1 again, sorry, skip 2. I did get the rhythm down the last time I did this. Single crochet, chain 1, go into the, so you're only going into that chain loop space 1 time with a slip stitch. And every time you do it, you chain 1, skip 2 stitches, single crochet, chain 1. Oop, go over here to the next one. And it's going to look wonky until you get all the way across. All right, I'm going to slip stitch into that space, chain 1, skip 2 stitches, single crochet, chain 1, and I have 1 more loop on this side. Slip stitch into the last loop, chain 1, skip 2 stitches. It should put me into the corner. It does. 1, 2, and this time we're going into that loop that we have made because we've already gone around this side. And you are going to do a single crochet into that loop. And I'm just going to stop for a second. And what it does is it, by slip stitching into the loop from this side, you've created a loop on this side. And that's what that looks like. I'm going to flip it back around the way we had started. So I had started here and done my joining row all the way around. This looks like it doesn't quite meet up, but remember, you're going to add an edging here and we'll even that out just a little bit. So don't worry about that. And then I added the joining row as I joined here. And then, let's make another square that's not attached. Okay. So I've gotten to the corner space here. From what I have unpinned, my next square is going to go here. So this has it, so I'm going to use a joining row to an unjoined row. We don't care about these yet, okay? Don't worry about these sides. Just where this side is connecting to this side. And I would do the same thing, but I'm going to turn it around because I can't work backwards. Okay. So I had joined here. I'm going to slip stitch into my new square. Let's see, no, I had done a chain one. I'm sorry, single crochet. I'm going to chain one, single crochet into my new square. So let me show you where this is working out to be. So I've done a single crochet in this corner space. I'm going to chain one. I'm going to slip stitch into the loop over here. It's already connected to this one. But I'm going to slip stitch in there, chain one, and then I'm going to make another single crochet into the same corner space. And what that does is it allows the corners to come to, and actually it's going to go like this. It allows the corners to come together without puckering. And I'll work this row the same way I work this row. And then eventually I will be adding another square here, and this loop will get added into there. And since I've only got, one single in each one, it's not packed with stitches, and I'll be able to do that. So you would work all the way across here. In the same way, I'm going to turn it around. So, it's already turned around, sorry. In the same way, so now my corner is joined. I'm over here. Same way that we started over on this side. I've ended with a single crochet. I am going to chain one, slip stitch to the first loop on this side. Chain one, skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, single, chain one, slip stitch into the next one, chain one, skip 2 stitches, single, chain one, slip stitch. So all that I'm really making sure is I'm not skipping any loops on the side that has the loops, skip 2 stitches. So you can see that if I were to accidentally skip 3 stitches, would it really matter? Probably not. What you want to make sure though is that you are joining, you're not skipping any of the loops, which is why it's important to make sure you've got 5 loops on each side. It will keep it relatively straight. So I'm going to skip 2. I did a little over stitching there, so I think that's where my stitch is. Chain one, go into this one. So once you get the rhythm of this, it does go. Skip 1, 2. I think that's where my last one, the next one is. Chain one. I have one more loop right here. Slip stitch, chain one, and I'm going to end in this corner space with a chain one. So we can see how this looks. And if you spread them apart, you can see we're getting that nice. Somebody asked earlier if you should block these ahead of time. I didn't feel like I needed to. And honestly, it's a lot of squares. I didn't, unless they all looked really wonky, I wouldn't block them ahead of time. I think you can block this whole thing at the end and be just fine. Particularly before you fold and do the side seams, you could do that. So I would continue on the same way, joining into the corner again until I had added all of my second row. Okay, so I would have, for my particular one, I think I have 4 here, and then no, I have 5. And then I would have a bunch of squares from row 1. So the only one of that second row that has joining rows on it is the very first one we started. When you get all the way to the end and you've added grab another square. Should have more squares set aside. So we're doing it. When you get all the way to the end, so I haven't cut the yarn yet from here. I had to cut it at the end of the half squares, but then I've been continuing on, joining here, joining here, joining here, joining here, until I get to the very last one. Okay. And then I could add the joining row here without breaking my yarn, add it here, add it here. There would be one here. Could add it here and here and here and here, and not have to break my yarn until I got all the way back here. So that's a whole lot of ends you don't have to weave in. That's the benefit of doing it this way. And then you have row 1 and row 2 all joined. And then I would unpin the next row and you would do the same thing and add it. Now these are all finished, like these were all finished. So you would have to do a partial around a new square, and then the next one would get tucked in right there. And it isn't until the 4th row that one is going to get added up here. So the diagram is what really helps you with this. Zoom in here. So her green, we started with the pink lines, and we made all of our joining rows connecting them. And then we went around the first one and we joined where the white lines are. And then you can keep going where the green lines are, joining all of these, and then you have to cut your yarn. And then you have to go around another square and keep going, okay? But it reduces the number of ends. Are there any questions? Because I feel like it's confusing because I keep having to turn it, but it may not be as confusing as you think.
So Pam, you said there's some updated directions because mine doesn't look like yours.
Okay, so do you have the pattern on Ravelry?
I think so, yes.
So there was an update via Ravelry
Okay,
that she put out, I want to say last month, which out of the blue, that we happen to be
Okay.
working on this, she did an update to it. And I think she added more pages, and it's mostly about the joining.
okay,
But I think she cleared it up a fair amount.
okay.
Yeah.
I'll print those.
But
Okay.
now I have it all together, and I don't know what was new and what was old because I've updated the pattern. Because I can't see what the old one looked like, and now I've put them all together. So I apologize for that.
Not a problem.
Okay.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
If you do those loops all the way around all your squares,
Yeah.
except for the triangles,
Correct.
and then how do you join the loops?
The way I showed you here, slip stitch them with 2 slip stitches.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah. So you get now you can see how that looks. How the join looks on that is very similar, if not exactly how the join looks on this.
Okay,
You get I wanted to do something that would keep the same design that she had.
mm-hmm,
But might be a little easier. So honestly, here's what I'm thinking about doing, because I haven't finished all of my squares. Now I have to decide, because it would be really easy just to add that joining round to the squares I haven't done yet, but that might throw the whole thing off. I think I might just do a join as you go, because now I've figured it out. I feel like I have to tackle it for my own. But you
I'm
can
just
decide.
wondering if the join as you go, like if the sizing doesn't come out right, you might have to take them apart and then put them back together.
So that leads perfectly to the next step. So before you do any joining of squares, I highly recommend, however you're going to lay it out, whatever size you're doing, lay it out. You don't have to necessarily, this morning, the only thing that we did is we laid out her pattern. If this is I think this is the size she's doing. So, whoops, there we go. We laid out all of her squares for the front. And so this is the front. Here's where the neck starts, right here. And for the first half of the sleeves. And actually we laid it out all the way through the sleeves. And we pinned it all together. And here's what then we were able to do. By doing that, I was able, just with the pinning, let me move to the pinning. I'm kind of taking this apart a little, so let's zoom out. Well, it's not exact because I don't have joining rows on these. There is some room in between them. So we could hold this up to her and see how it was fitting, how it was hanging on her, okay? This happens to be, for my size, that I'm making a sleeve. I'm gonna switch off the camera. I'm gonna switch it so I can hold it up to you real quick. So for my size, my sleeve is ginormous. I mean, as far as circumference, I mean, look how much room is in there. It's huge. I don't want ginormous sleeves, okay? So it's got almost a whole row too much. I can adjust the length. That's easy enough to do, is adding another row of squares or half, whatever. But I don't need all of this bulk underneath. And Michelle, who has mostly finished hers, she had actually joined her sleeves and came in and tried it on. And it just was like a ton of squares and yardage underneath her arm, and it didn't look good. So we were able to take it apart here. If we had just pinned it first, it would have been so much easier. So that's what I want to show you first, is get your, at least the front half and the sleeves laid out and pinned so that you can figure out your sizing. If you want to add more rows, if you want it to be longer, you'll know that before you start to join them all together, and you can get the color layout the way you want it to be. If you don't want your sleeves to be as huge, so if these would get joined like this, I mean, that's going to be a ton for my arm. But and then it's just all going to gather underneath here. So let me show you how you can adjust that. So I felt like the pinning, and I didn't do a great job on the pinning. I just used my little stitch markers. She had like the coilless safety pins, which held it together a little better. But it was enough to see it was going to be huge. So there's enough, I think, space in between here, in between my squares, that would act as the joining rows. Okay, so I think for my particular pattern, this is where the shoulder, like this would be the neck here around my neck, and the shoulder, it folds halfway through a square, okay? So I'm gonna flip it over. All right, so I believe this is where my neck was here. And then it folds under the arm. And it gets sewn together like that. Okay, I'm just gonna lay my arm across there. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot in there, okay? But I can tell this before I've joined it together. So what I wanna do is, and I think what we did for Michelle is that we took out this row here, and we took out this row here. And that's why I have it folded so you can see. You don't really want to take it out on this side. You want to take it underneath where you're going to be doing the seaming. And we ended up replacing with half. We replaced those rows. She made some additional half. And if it doesn't quite match up underneath, I don't really care. You're not going to be looking underneath my arm if it's two half triangles or half squares coming together here. But it took out a whole 5 inches underneath the arm, which worked out to be perfect. You could take out 2 whole rows. I could take this one out, just depending on what fits you. So I could take out this one here. And I didn't want it to fall apart before I did this, so I put lots of pins in. And we'll take that one out. And this one out. Okay. And you could just add halves here and add halves here. Or I could take out this row in addition and put, I took out those halves. So it's like using, it ends up getting matched up like male to female. So you've got this edge fits into the valley here. You got your peaks and your valleys here. So if you took out a row on each side, it should still match up peaks and valleys. So if you wanted it a little tighter, that didn't just take out, you know, a half from each side, it took out a whole from each side. So I'm even thinking I'll have to pin this together and I'm going to slip it on my arm and see how that feels. And if that seemed, I'll just do it right now. And then I can undo it and then I'll know which squares I need to join together. So you almost have to have all the squares you need first to figure out which ones you got to take out. We also, if this is the neck here, then on the reverse side here is going to be a armpit. I think we changed, we added a quarter square. I think we took out one of these and added 2 quarter squares or a half square going this direction to take out some of the bulk in the armpit. So, but by pinning it all together, you can actually try it on and see, oh, yeah, that actually feels pretty good. Okay. Does that make sense? If you're gonna, I'm gonna bring this to the retreat, so if any
Yep.
of you are coming to the retreat, I will have it to show. We'll have it in person, but that was, it's easy to take out on your sides. It was the sleeve part that we found was the hardest part, whoops, the hardest part to adjust for. Because you don't want to take it out of where it's going to fold across here. You want to take it out from underneath here so that this lays nice and flat across here. If it is too wide, when you have it pinned together and you throw it on and it's going to be way too wide, you can take out these corner pieces or these end pieces and you could switch. Let me find the one we did here. So here's where we started. If I found it was too wide, so maybe instead of having a full piece here, instead, I only do a half. That's going to take, and if I did that on both the front and the back, that's going to take a whole square, which is roughly 5 inches out. Or maybe you only do it on one side. You know, you have options there to adjust the width, but it is supposed to be a little bit boxy. If you felt like you needed to add more, you wanted it a little bigger, you could add another, whoops, another row here and extend it a little bit. But it is going to be boxy. So if it's big around your waist, it's going to stay big around here. Okay. There's not a ton you can do other than maybe you could change all, you know, some of these to half triangles going up and then just do it a little bit additional finagling with your seaming that way. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Once I got in the rhythm of the joining, it actually went really smooth. I feel like the biggest step after you've made all of the squares, which is no small feat, is to take the time to lay it out and pin it out and make sure it's going to fit. If you are doing it for somebody else, know their measurements and know their arm circumference and how long you want it to be. Because that's easy enough to measure. When you have it pinned together, you can fold it up and decide, oh, wow, that is huge. I know she's talked about in her pattern that she had made this originally for her daughter. And as she grew, and as she grew and got taller, she cut out these and added another row and then put a new bottom on it. So she made the whole thing a whole nother row longer. So you can add length to it that way. And she does give tips in here in the pattern about if you want to add length, the best place to do it. And I don't think I even got that far. I was so obsessed about getting the sleeves to fit. She talks about okay. This is exactly, she recommends adding, if you want it to be longer or shorter, to change it in this first row. So either add or before you get up to the neckline, obviously, either add another row in here, in which case you need to add it for front and back, or take out this first row of squares so you don't have as many rows going up. Which you can use your little diagram to help decide. If I wanted to add another row, I would need, to follow my design, I would need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more of, let's say, square B to fit into there. And then I could use my half squares underneath there. And then I would do the same thing here. Same thing for shortening the ends of the sleeves. Although when Michelle tried hers on, she had not added the edging because she thought she might want to, she just kind of jumped ahead before we'd gotten through this. She started hers not here, but she started with the second row. So hers was jagged at the end, which actually looked kind of cute, but ultimately she decided to go in and then add these so she could have a straight hem at the bottom. It looked kind of cute. And I think on maybe somebody younger, it would look cute if you had a zigzag. You could just add the edging to the border, to the ends like that, or you can add those in. But she knew she might want to add another row, so she didn't start here in case she wanted to add another row in. She wouldn't have her edging already added. But if she had pinned the whole thing and thrown it on first, she wouldn't have had to have done that. So we'll learn from her mistakes. Are there any more questions? I know I've been blathering for quite a while. So I know everyone's excited. We're going to take another month
Yes.
and not have to
Yep.
start another one. I do think, I know it. The next thing, so we'll carry this through August, and I'll have all of mine put together with my sleeves adjusted, and then we'll work on the edging and the around the neckline and the hem and the sleeves. After that, in September, we'll start a new project, and it's going to be I'm going to teach you how to do the African violet granny. It's kind of a granny design, and a variety of things you can do with it. You can do stuffed animals with it. You can do blankets, lots of things you can do with it. So I'm going to just teach you how to do it, and that'll be a 1-month project, and then we'll figure out what to do next. So, but we aren't going to do another big project until this one's done. Because Lord have mercy, I can't finish anything. I'm going to stop the recording.